The rain was hitting my apartment window like bullets that night in March. And I remember thinking how fitting it was. Because that's exactly how I felt. Like everything was just attacking me all at once. I was 23, broke, and had just received the final text message that would change everything. We can't do this anymore. You're on your own now. It wasn't from a boyfriend. It wasn't from some casual friend. It was from my sister Emma. The last person in my family who I thought still cared. The last thread connecting me to the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And just like that, it snapped. Let me back up a bit. Because this story doesn't start with that text. It starts 2 years earlier when I made what everyone called the biggest mistake of my life. I dropped out of college in my junior year to start my own business. Not just any business. An online consulting company helping small businesses with their digital marketing. I know. Everyone and their grandmother thinks they can do digital marketing these days. But I had something different. I had ideas. I had passions. And I had this burning need to prove that I could make it without following the traditional path. My parents went ballistic. My dad, who worked his way up from being a factory worker to a plant manager, couldn't understand why I'd throw away my education. You're 3/4 done with your degree. Sarah, he kept saying, just finish it. You can always start a business later. My mom was even worse. She'd call me crying, asking what she did wrong as a mother. Like my decision was some kind of reflection of her parenting. But Emma was different at first. She was 2 years older than me. Already graduated. Working her safe little marketing job at a mid-sized company. She didn't love what I was doing. But she supported me. If this is what you really want, she told me over coffee one afternoon, then I believe in you. Those words meant everything to me. The first year was brutal. I was working 18-hour days, living off ramen noodles and whatever free food I could find at networking events. I had moved into this tiny studio apartment that was basically a glorified closet. But it was mine. And it was affordable. My business was growing slowly. Very slowly. I had landed a few small clients. But nothing that was paying the bills consistently. That's when the real problems started. My parents began what I now realize was a calculated campaign to get me to give up. They stopped inviting me to family dinners. When I did show up to holidays, every conversation somehow turned into a lecture about my irresponsible choices. My dad would make these passive-aggressive comments about how some people think they are too good for honest work. My mom would sigh dramatically whenever anyone asked about me and say things like, "We're just hoping she comes to her senses soon." The worst part was watching how they treated Emma versus how they treated me. Suddenly, she became the golden child who made smart decisions and had her life together. They'd brag about her job, her apartment, her steady boyfriend, and then they'd look at me like I was this cautionary tale they were embarrassed to acknowledge. Emma started pulling away too. At first, she said she was just busy with work. Then it was busy with her boyfriend, Marcus. Then it was just busy. Our weekly coffee dates turned into monthly check-ins, which turned into occasional text messages. I could feel her slipping away, but I kept telling myself she was just going through her own stuff. Meanwhile, my business was actually starting to pick up. I had landed this amazing client, a local restaurant chain that wanted to completely overhaul their online presence. It was exactly the kind of project I had been dreaming about. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, believed in my vision and was willing to pay me fairly for my work. For the first time in months, I could see a real future for myself. But then disaster struck. Mrs. Rodriguez got sick. Really sick. Cancer. The restaurant project got put on hold indefinitely while she focused on her treatment. My other smaller clients were either scaling back their marketing budgets or going with larger, more established agencies. Within 6 weeks, I went from feeling like I was finally making it to being completely broke. I'm talking about having $17 in my bank account kind of broke. Talking about choosing between buying groceries and paying my phone bill kind of broke. Talking about lying awake at night wondering if I could swallow my pride and ask my parents for help. Knowing they would say yes, but only if I agreed to go back to school and give up on my business. That's when I reached out to Emma. I didn't even ask for money at first. I just wanted someone to talk to. Someone who might understand what I was going through. We met for coffee. I bought the cheapest thing on the menu and made it last 2 hours. And I opened up to her about everything. How scared I was. How alone I felt. How sometimes I wondered if everyone had been right about me making a huge mistake. She listened. And for a moment, I thought I had my sister back. She hugged me when I started crying and told me that everything would work out. You're stronger than you know, she said. And you're not alone. I'm here for you. But then she went home and told Marcus everything. And Marcus, who worked in finance and had never liked me because he thought I was financially irresponsible, convinced her that I was a lost cause. He told her that supporting me was just enabling my delusions, and that the kindest thing she could do was let me hit rock bottom so I'd be forced to make better choices. I found out about all of this later. But at the time, I just noticed that Emma started acting weird. She'd take forever to respond to my messages. When we did talk, she seemed distracted and uncomfortable. She cancelled our plans more often than she kept them. And slowly, I realized what was happening. She was pulling away from me just like everyone else had. The final blow came when I got evicted from my apartment. I had been behind on rent for 2 months, and my landlord had finally run out of patience. I had nowhere to go. My parents had made it clear that their door was open only if I came back with my tail between my legs. Ready to admit I had been wrong about everything. My few remaining friends were either unable to help or unwilling to get involved in what they saw as family drama. So I called Emma. It was a Tuesday night, and I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner. All my possessions stuffed into garbage bags in my backseat. I called her crying, explaining what had happened, asking if I could just stay on her couch for a few days while I figured out my next move. There was this long silence on the phone. Then she said, "Sarah, I think maybe this is what you need to really understand that this isn't working." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Maybe if you didn't have a safety net, you'd finally make the right choice. What are you saying? I asked, though I already knew. I'm saying I can't keep watching you destroy your life. And I can't be part of it anymore. That's when she sent that text I mentioned earlier. We can't do this anymore. You're on your own now. And then she blocked me. Blocked my numbers. Blocked me on social media. Cut me off completely. I sat in that diner parking lot until sunrise, trying to process what had just happened. Everyone I had ever loved, everyone I had ever counted on, had abandoned me. And they had done it while convincing themselves that they were doing it for my own good. I won't lie to you. The next few months were the darkest of my life. I ended up staying in a series of cheap motels and extended stay places, using the last of my savings and whatever money I could make from tiny freelance projects. There were nights when I seriously considered calling my parents and telling them they had been right all along. There were days when I questioned everything I had ever believed about myself. But there was also something else growing inside me during those dark months. Anger. Pure, focused rage at everyone who had given up on me. At my parents who had chosen their disappointment over their daughter. At Emma who had chosen her boyfriend's opinions over her sister's well-being. At every person who had decided that I wasn't worth fighting for. And you know what I did with that anger? I turned it into fuel. I started taking on any project I could find. I worked with struggling entrepreneurs who couldn't afford big agencies. I helped mom and pop shops figure out social media. I took on projects that barely paid anything. But I treated each one like it was the most important client in the world. Because for me, it was. Every success, no matter how small, was proof that I hadn't been delusional. Every satisfied client was evidence that I had something valuable to offer. Slowly, very slowly, things started to turn around. One happy client referred me to another. That client referred me to someone else. I started specializing in helping businesses that had been overlooked by larger agencies. Family restaurants, local service providers, small retail shops. These weren't glamorous clients, but they appreciated my work. They paid their bills on time, and they started to trust me with bigger and bigger projects. By the end of that first year on my own, I was making more money than I ever had before. Not just surviving, actually thriving. I was able to move into a real apartment again. A nice one-bedroom place with good light and space for a proper home office. I started putting money into savings for the first time in my adult life. But the real breakthrough came when Mrs. Rodriguez got back in touch with me. Her treatment had been successful, and she was ready to move forward with the restaurant project. But now, instead of being a struggling freelancer desperate for work, I was an established consultant with a growing reputation. I was able to negotiate better terms, bring on subcontractors to help with the workload, and deliver results that exceeded everyone's expectations. The restaurant campaign was a huge success. Sales increased by 40% in the first quarter after we launched. Mrs. Rodriguez was so happy that she started recommending me to other business owners in her network. Suddenly, I had more work than I could handle. That's when I made the decision to officially incorporate and start hiring employees. 2 years after being abandoned by my family, I was running a real company with real employees and real profits. 3 years after that, we had grown to 15 employees and were working with clients all over the state. The success felt incredible, but it also felt hollow in a way that I hadn't expected. Because the people I most wanted to share it with, the people who should have been celebrating with me, weren't there. They had made their choice, and now I was living with the consequences of their decision just as much as they were. I tried not to think about my family during those years. I threw myself into work, into building something that no one could ever take away from me again. I surrounded myself with people who believed in what I was doing. My employees, my clients, other entrepreneurs who understood the struggle. I created my own families, my own support system. But then, about 4 years after that terrible night in the diner parking lot, my phone started ringing. It started with my mom. She called me at my office on a Thursday afternoon, and when my assistant told me who it was, I almost didn't take the calls. But curiosity got the better of me. "Sarah," she said when I picked up, her voice tentative and uncertain. "It's Mom. I know who it is." I replied, probably more coldly than I intended. I've been thinking about you. I heard about your business. Mrs. Patterson from church mentioned that you're doing really well." Mrs. Patterson from church? Of course. In a town this size, news travels fast, especially when it's about someone who was written off as a failure making good. "What do you want?" "Mom," I asked. "I want to talk to you. I want to see you. It's been so long. And I miss you." The conversation was awkward and stilted, but she managed to ask if we could meet for lunch. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Seeing her again was surreal. She looked older, more tired than I remembered, and she seemed nervous in a way that was completely unfamiliar to me. Growing up, my mom had always been this confident, take-charge person who knew exactly what she thought about everything. Now she seemed unsure, almost fragile. We made small talk for a while. How was work? How was I feeling? Did I like my apartment? But finally, she got to the real reason she had called. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. A big one. Your father and I, we handled things badly. We were scared for you, and we thought we were doing the right things. But we were wrong. We were so wrong." I sat there listening to her, feeling this mix of vindication and sadness that I hadn't expected. Part of me had dreamed of this moment, of hearing her admit that they had been wrong about me. But now that it was happening, all I could think about was how alone I had felt when I needed them most. "We've been talking," she continued. "Your father and I, we've been talking about you a lot. Actually, we're so proud of what you've accomplished. We're proud of you. And we want to be part of your life again. If you'll let us. The conversation went on for 2 hours. She told me about how they had regretted cutting me off almost immediately, but hadn't known how to fix it. How they had been too proud to admit they were wrong. How they had followed my business online, watching from a distance as I succeeded without them. A week later, my dad called. That conversation was harder, because apologies don't come as easily to him. But the message was the same. They wanted me back in their lives. They wanted to be a family again. And then, about a month later, Emma reached out. Her message came through Instagram. Apparently she had unblocked me at some point without telling me. It was long and rambling and full of explanations about how she had been confused and influenced by Marcus, who, she mentioned casually, she had broken up with 6 months earlier. She talked about how she had made a terrible mistake, how she had regretted abandoning me every day since it happened, how she had wanted to reach out so many times but hadn't known what to say or how to fix what she had broken. I know I don't deserve it, she wrote, but I'm hoping you might be willing to give me another chance. I miss you so much. Sarah. I miss my sister. Reading that message brought up emotions I didn't even know I still had. Anger, hurt, longing, love, all of it swirling around at the same time. Because as much as I had built a new life without them, part of me had never stopped wanting them back. But I also wasn't the same person they had abandoned 4 years earlier. I wasn't that desperate, broke girl who needed their approval to feel worth something. I was successful now, confident, surrounded by people who valued me. I didn't need them anymore, which meant that any relationship we rebuilt would have to be on different terms. The reconciliation process was complicated and messy. There were a lot of difficult conversations, a lot of hurt feelings that had to be worked through. My parents struggled with accepting that I was no longer the person they could give advice to about life choices. Emma had to deal with the fact that I wasn't eager to just pick up where we left off, as if nothing had happened. But slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding relationships. It helped that they could see I hadn't just succeeded despite their absence. I had succeeded because of it. Being abandoned had forced me to become stronger, more self-reliant, more focused. It had taught me to trust my own judgment and to value people who stood by me during difficult times. My business continued to grow. We expanded into new markets, hired more employees, won awards for our work. I bought a house, a beautiful 3-bedroom place with a home office and a garden. I started dating again, eventually meeting someone who respected my ambition and understood my story. I built a life that was fuller and richer than anything I had imagined when I was sitting in that diner parking lot. And you know what's interesting? My family's abandonment, which had felt like the end of the world at the time, actually turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because it forced me to discover what I was really made of. It taught me that I could survive anything, that I could build something meaningful from nothing, that I didn't need anyone else's permission to be successful. When they came back into my life, they found someone completely different from the person they had left behind. They found someone who had learned to value herself, who had built her own support system, who didn't need their approval to know she was worthy of love and respect. The relationships we have now are better in many ways than they ever were before. They are more honest, more equals, more based on mutual respect than on obligation or guilt. My parents have learned to trust my judgment, and they've become genuinely proud of what I've accomplished. Emma and I have rebuilt our friendship on a foundation of adult understanding rather than childhood habit. But I'll never forget what it felt like to be abandoned by everyone I loved at my lowest point. And I'll never forget the strength I discovered in myself when I had no choice but to stand alone. Sometimes people ask me if I forgive them, if I'm angry about what happened. The truth is, it's complicated. I understand why they did what they did, and I can see how their fear and disappointment clouded their judgment. I don't spend my time being bitter about it anymore. But I also don't pretend that what happened didn't change me fundamentally. I learned that the people you love most can let you down in ways you never imagined possible. I learned that sometimes the people who claim to want what's best for you are really just protecting themselves from the discomfort of watching you struggle. Most importantly, I learned that I am stronger than I ever knew. That I can build a life worth living even when everyone around me says it's impossible. Now, when young entrepreneurs reach out to me for advice, when they tell me about family members who don't support their dreams, I tell them my story. I tell them that sometimes the people who love you will try to talk you out of taking risks. Not because your dreams are impossible, but because they are scared of watching you fail. And I tell them that if you're going to succeed at something difficult, something that requires you to bet on yourself when no one else will, you have to be prepared to do it alone. You have to be prepared to be your own support system, your own cheerleader, your own safety net. Because the people who abandon you at rock bottom don't get to claim credit for your success. They don't get to pretend that their lack of faith somehow motivated you to prove them wrong. Your success belongs to you. To your persistence, your resilience, your refusal to give up even when giving up would have been easier. The phone calls and messages still come sometimes. Distant relatives who heard about my business. Old college friends who want to reconnect. People who weren't there when I needed them but want to be part of my life now that it looks attractive from the outside. And I'm polite to them. But I'm also selective. Because I learned the hard way that not everyone deserves access to your success. Especially people who weren't willing to be part of your struggle. My story isn't about revenge or proving people wrong. It's about discovering that you are enough, all by yourself, to build the life you want. It's about learning that being abandoned, while painful, isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning of the chapter where you learn to write your own narrative. Today, my business employs 23 people. We work with clients in 12 states. I own my homes. I have money in the bank. And I wake up every morning excited about the work I get to do. I have relationships with people who value me for who I am, not who they think I should be. And sometimes, late at night when I'm working on a particularly challenging project, I think about that girl sitting in the diner parking lot with everything she owned stuffed into garbage bags. I think about how terrified she was, how alone she felt, how sure she was that her life was over. And I wish I could tell her that she was about to discover something incredible about herself. That rock bottom wasn't where her story ended. It was where her real story began.